Chapter 1 of Mark Twain's Journal Writings, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by John Greenman. Mark Twain's Journal Writings, Volume 1, Chapter 1. Americans on a Visit to the Emperor of Russia. Yalta, Russia, August 26, 1867. The passengers on board the American steamship Quaker City have been paying a pleasant, informal visit to His Majesty, the autocrat of all the Russias, at his summer palace near this village. We were not smothered with attentions at Constantinople. America is in bad odor there, on account of her outspoken sympathy with the Cretans. But we found a different atmosphere in Russia. At Sebastopol we were received with great cordiality, and were not even asked to show our passports, a singular thing to occur in a Russian port. We were surprised because we had been warned that those documents would be called for and strictly scrutinized about every 40 minutes while we remained in the Czar's territories. One of the passengers began to inquire into the matter. The Russian officer he spoke to explained it in a very few words, and very gracefully he said, "Yonder is your passport. The flag you are flying is sufficient." The Sebastopolitans said the Emperor of Russia was spending the summer at the little watering place of Yalta, 40 miles away, and warmly recommended us to take the ship there and visit him. They said they could ensure us a kind reception. They insisted on telegraphing and also sending a courier overland to announce us. But we had been told that the great Viceroy of Egypt had had his visit there almost for nothing a few days before, and we were modest enough to have our doubts. So we went our way to Odessa, 200 miles distant. Again we were well received, and again they said, "Go and see the Emperor." Finally the Governor-General telegraphed the court, a prompt reply was returned, and we sailed toward Yalta. A great question had to be solved. What is to be done, and how are we to do it? We had the United States consul on board, the Odessa consul. We assembled all hands in the cabin, and commanded him to tell us what we must do to be saved, and tell us quickly. He made a speech. The first thing he said fell like a blight upon every hopeful spirit. He had never seen a court reception. 3 groans for the consul. But he said he had seen receptions at the Governor-General's in Odessa, and had often listened to people's experiences of receptions at the Russian and various other courts, and believed he knew pretty well what sort of ordeal we were about to essay. Hope budded again. He said we were many. The summer palace was small, a mere mansion. Doubtless we should be received in summer fashion. In the garden we would stand in a row, all the gentlemen in swallow-tail coats, white kids, white neckties, and the ladies in light-colored silks or something of that kind. At the proper moment, 12 meridian, the Emperor, attended by his suite, arrayed in splendid uniforms, would appear and walk slowly along the line, bowing to some and saying 2 or 3 words to others. At the moment His Majesty appeared, a universal, delighted, enthusiastic smile ought to break out like an epidemic among the passengers, a smile of love, of gratification, of admiration, and with one accord. The party must begin to bow, not obsequiously, but respectfully and with dignity, and at the end of 15 minutes the Emperor would go in the house, and we could shin along home again. We felt immensely relieved. It seemed, in a manner, easy. There wasn't a man in the party but believed that with a little practice he could stand in a row, especially if there were others along. There wasn't a man but believed he could bow without tripping on his coat-tail and breaking his neck. In a word, we came to believe we were equal to any item in the performance except that complicated smile. The council also said that we ought to draft a little address to the Emperor, and present it to one of his aides-de-camp, who would forward it to him at the proper time. Therefore, 5 of us were appointed to prepare the document, and the 50 others went sadly smiling about the ship. During the next 12 hours we had the general appearance, somehow, of being at a funeral where everybody was sorry the death had occurred, but glad it was over, where everybody was smiling, and yet broken-hearted. The consul's closing statement was that it would be etiquette to invite the Emperor to visit the ship, and that he would respectfully decline as usual. A committee went ashore to wait on His Excellency the Governor-General and learn our fate. At the end of 3 hours of boding suspense they came back and said the Emperor would receive us at noon the next day, would send carriages for us, would hear the address in person. The Grand Duke Michael had sent to invite us to his palace also. Both desired to visit the ship the following day with their families, the weather permitting. Counterfeited smiles never gave place to real ones so suddenly before. Any man could see that there was an intention here to show that Russia's friendship for America was so genuine as to render even her private citizens objects worthy of kindly attentions. At the appointed hour we drove out 3 miles and assembled in the handsome garden in front of the Emperor's palace. In 5 minutes the autocrat came out, and with him the Empress, the Grand Duchess Marie, her daughter, a pretty blue-eyed, fair-haired girl of 14, and a little Grand Duke about 10 years old. With them came a few princes and great dignitaries in handsome but not gaudy uniforms. We took off our hats. I smiled a reckless smile at the finest uniform, but I found it was only the Lord High Admiral, and so I had to smile it all over again. If I had had any sense I might have known that the imperial family would be the plainest dressed personages on the spot. The consul read the address to the Emperor, and then handed it to me. He said a word or two in reply and passed the document to a court dignitary. This is the address: To His Imperial Majesty, Alexander II, Emperor of Russia. We are a handful of private citizens of America, traveling simply for recreation, and unostentatiously, as becomes our unofficial state. And therefore we have no excuse to tender for presenting ourselves before your Majesty save the desire of offering our grateful acknowledgments to the Lord of a realm, which, through good and through evil report, has been the steadfast friend of the land we love so well. We could not presume to take a step like this did we not know well that the words we speak here, and the sentiments wherewith they are freighted, are but the reflex of the thoughts and feelings of all our countrymen from the green hills of New England to the shores of the far Pacific. We are few in number, but we utter the voice of a nation. One of the brightest pages that has graced the world's history since written history had its birth was recorded by your Majesty's hand when it loosed the bonds of 20 millions of men, and Americans can but esteem it a privilege to do honor to a ruler who has wrought so great a deed. The lesson that was taught us then we have profited by, and we are free in truth today, even as we were before in name. America owes much to Russia, is indebted to her in many ways, and chiefly for her unwavering friendship in seasons of our greatest need. That friendship may still be hers in times to come we confidently pray. That she is and will be grateful to Russia and to her sovereign for it, we know full well. That she will ever forfeit it by any unpremeditated, unjust act or unfair course, it were treason to believe. Samuel L. Clemens, William Gibson, Timothy D. Crocker, S. A. Sanford, Colonel P. Kinney, U.S.A. Committee on behalf of the passengers of the steamer Quaker City. The Emperor had on a white cloth cap, and white cloth coat and pantaloons, all of questionable fineness. The Empress and her daughter wore simple suits of foulard with a little blue spot in it, blue trimmings, low-crowned straw hats trimmed with blue velvet, linen collars, clerical neckties of muslin, blue sashes, flesh-colored gloves, parasols. Lady readers will take due notice. The exceeding simplicity of these dresses would insure them against creating a sensation in Broadway. The little Grand Duke wore a red calico blouse and a straw hat, and had his pantaloons tucked into his boots. Simplicity of costume and kingly stateliness of manner cannot go very well together, and I was curious to see how the imperial party would act. They acted as if they had never been used to anything finer. They were as free from any semblance of pride or haughtiness as if their house had always been a village minister's house. They conversed freely and unconstrainedly with anybody and everybody that came along. They all speak English, and so did the great officers of the empire that were with them. Our party of Americans, who were so distressed the day before as to how they were going to get through this severe trial with credit, suddenly found themselves entirely at home and comfortable. The 15 minutes' audience pleasantly augmented itself to half an hour, and then, instead of dismissing the guests, the autocrat of all the Russias and his family transformed themselves into ushers, and led our tribe into the palace dining-room, into the library, the private chapel, the sitting-rooms, private writing-rooms, all over the establishment, in fact. I cannot recollect half the places. There was no hurry. There were plenty of affable dukes and princes and admirals to answer questions, and this part of the program insensibly wore out another half-hour, and something over. When there was nothing more to see, the imperial family bade the guests good-bye till tomorrow, and we departed for the palace of the Grand Duke Michael. The young Grand Duchess, however, went to another door and bowed at the party in detail as they passed by. If you have ever called on an emperor, you will remember that little attentions not strictly in the bill were the very ones that went furthest toward making you feel comfortable. That young girl's pleasant face, its expression of friendly interest, and her timid bow were not calculated to make anyone feel like a tiresome nuisance. In my own case I know this was so. It struck me forcibly at the time that I had seldom felt so little like a nuisance before. It is singular, but for the moment I forgot that before all this leave-taking occurred. We were invited to the palace of the Crown Prince of Russia, aged 20, and shown all through it with the same absence of hurry as was the case at his father's mansion. A drive of 20 minutes brought us to the beautiful park and gardens and the elegant palace of the Grand Duke Michael. The first persons we saw there were the Empress and her daughter. They had come by a nearer road, I suppose. Whether justly or not, we chose to consider this as a mark that they were not altogether tired of us yet. The introduction to the Grand Duke and his Duchess was hardly over when the Emperor arrived himself. This was about as cheerful as it could be. He caught up his brother's little children and kissed them affectionately. I could not help noticing that, because it was so little like what we had reason to expect from the stern Russian bear we read about so much. The Grand Duchess was as simply dressed as the Empress, was as gentle and unreserved, and as ready to talk with everybody. Her husband was just like her in these respects, a splendid-looking man over 6 feet high, well-formed, and endowed with as kindly a presence as one could wish to see. He wore a handsome Cossack uniform, and looked the military commander to a charm. He it was who crushed out, in a 2 months' campaign, the Caucasian War that had lasted 60 years, and won the coveted First-Degree Cross of the Order of St. George, the only man who has been so decorated in 200 years. It is a distinction that can be achieved, but the terms are not easy: dauntless courage, exalted military genius, and success. There was but little ceremony here. We were shown through the palace in the free and easy way we had already got accustomed to, and then our friends, the princes and generals and baronesses, conducted the gang all about the lawns and groves of the park. I enjoyed it. I had reached my level at last. If there is one thing I am naturally fitted for, it is to converse with dukes. I got along well. They could not understand the subtleties of an American joke, it is true, and so they generally laughed in the wrong place. However, it wasn't any matter. They were inferior jokes anyhow, and some of them were old. Some of us lingered in the grounds a good while, and when we got back we found the balance of the mob scattered about the reception-room and the verandas, sitting at little tables and drinking tea and wine and eating bread and cheese and cold meats with the Grand Duke, who ate at one table a while and then at another, and kept the conversation and the destruction of provisions going with a zeal which was perfectly astonishing in the brother of an emperor. I did not suppose that the brothers of autocrats were so much like other people. Some people have curious ways about them. This sort of thing may have suited His Imperial Highness, but if I were a Grand Duke I wouldn't eat with those varlets. As the circumstances stood, however, I took a hand. They give you a lemon to squeeze into your tea there, or iced milk if you prefer it. The former is best. The Grand Duke's tea was delicious. It is brought overland from China. It injures the article to transport it by sea. Well, to cut a long story short, it was a chatty, sociable tea-party, and free from restraint. Whoever chose got up and walked about and talked, and in all human probability would have been allowed to whistle if he had wanted to, and it was a pleasant picnic all through, from the time we left the ship till we got back again. We had spent nearly half a day with the heads of the Russian Empire, and it had seemed as if we were merely visiting a party of ordinary friends. There was not one of them but had said the kindest things about America, and said them with an earnestness that proved their sincerity. Not one but had done everything he could to make us feel contented and at home. I fear for our less liberal hospitality. If they visit the ships they will find a sign up, "No smoking abaft the wheel." But the Grand Duke passed around his box of cigars in his own reception-room. And there was another incident that shows how little he was inclined to put on airs, and how genuine the seeming cordiality of our reception was. This lordly brother of an emperor, and himself sub-chief of half an empire, came down on his horse to Yalta, 3 miles, when we first came ashore, and escorted our procession all the way to the palace, keeping a sharp lookout, and dispatching his aides hither and thither to furnish assistance whenever it was needed. And being dressed in an unpretentious uniform, nobody ever suspected who he was until we recognized him in his own palace. I doubt if he goes about escorting a rabble of plain civilians every day. You may possibly think that our party tarried too long or did other improper things, but such was not the case. Their going and coming, and all their movements, were quietly regulated by the imperial master of ceremonies. Mr. M. Curtin, our Secretary of Legation at St. Petersburg, was present, and his advice was frequently asked and followed. The company felt that they were occupying an unusually responsible position. They were representing the people of America, not the government, and therefore they were especially anxious to perform their high mission with credit. On the other hand, the imperial families no doubt considered that in entertaining us they were more especially entertaining the people of America than they could by showering attentions on the whole platoon of ministers plenipotentiary, and therefore they gave to the event its fullest significance as an expression of good will and friendly feeling toward the entire country. We took the kindnesses we received as attentions thus directed, of course, and not to ourselves as a party. That we felt a personal pride in being received as the representatives of a great people, we do not deny. That we felt a national pride in the warm cordiality of that reception cannot be doubted. The address and an account of the proceedings have already been forwarded to various Russian newspapers for publication, and thus our little holiday adventure is invested with a degree of political significance. It is well. We represented only the true feeling of America toward Russia when we thanked her, through her chief, for her valuable friendship in times past, and hoped that it would continue. The sea was very rough today, but still many Russian nobles, civilians, and officers of the army and navy have visited the ship. Among them were Baron Wrangel, formerly Russian ambassador at Washington, the admiral and several vice-admirals of the Russian fleets, and General Tottleben, the honored defender, for 18 trying months, of Sebastopol. For his distinguished services there, he has been decorated with the crosses of the 3rd and 4th degree of the Order of St. George. By invitation we visited the Empress's yacht this morning, and afterward brought back the captains of that vessel and of one of the Emperor's yachts to breakfast with us. We have visitors on board all the time, and if we only had the boundless politeness these Russians are naturally gifted with, we could entertain them well. They are able to make themselves pleasant company, whether they speak one's language or not. But our tribe can't think of anything to do or say when they get hold of a subject of the Czar who knows only his own language. However, one of our ladies from Cleveland, Ohio, is a notable exception to this rule. She escorts Russian ladies about the ship, and talks and laughs with them, and makes them feel at home. They comprehend no word she utters, but they understand the good will and the friendliness that are in the tones of her voice. I wish we had more like her. They all try, but none succeed so well as she. The Emperor is very tall and slender, spare, one may say, and his bearing is full of dignity and easy self-possession. An unbending will is stamped upon his face, and yet when he smiles his blue eyes are as gentle as a woman's. His hair and whiskers are very light. He is 48 years old, but looks about 53 or 54. The Grand Duke Michael is very tall and well-shaped, has a blue eye that must beam with a wicked light when he is angry, though it is lively and pleasant enough under peaceable circumstances. His whiskers and mustache, a modification of the Dundreary pattern, are light, and he cuts his hair as close as plush, and don't curl it. He is as straight as an Indian, and if ever a man looked what they call born to command, he does. His is the stateliest figure in Europe, I am willing to believe. His courtly grace, his fine military bearing, his varied accomplishments, and his knightly achievements make of him a Russian Sir Philip Sidney. He is greatly beloved in Russia. The Czar and his brother would be marked in a crowd as great men and good ones. The Emperor Napoleon would be marked in a crowd as a great man and a cunning one. The Sultan of Turkey would not be marked in a crowd at all. I want to see one more assortment of kings and average them, and then I shall be satisfied. The day is drawing to a close, and the sea is so rough that the Emperor will certainly not visit the ship. Baron Ungern Sternberg, the director of all the Russian railways, has come on board and is evidently at home with the passengers. He has traveled a great deal in America. He is preparing to web the empire with railroads. Prince Dolgoruki and Count Festetix, members of the Emperor's court, are also here, and we are getting ready to fire a salute for the Governor-General, who will be along directly with his family. They are laying carpets on the pier for them to walk on. They might have done that for the poet, but I suppose they didn't know he was here. We shall have a champagne spree directly, I suppose, and then bid our guests and Russia farewell, and sail for the sublime port. We have got so used to princes now that it is going to be hard work, during the next few days, to get down to the level of the common herd again. Mark Twain. End of Chapter 1. Americans on a Visit to the Emperor of Russia. Read by John Greenman. This is Section 2 of Mark Twain's Journal Writings, Volume 1. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Austrian Edison Keeping School Again, by Mark Twain. Read by John Greenman. By a paragraph in the Frey Presse, it appears that Jan Szczepanik, the youthful inventor of the telelectroscope, for seeing at great distances, and some other scientific marvels, has been having an odd adventure by help of the state. Vienna is hospitably ready to smile whenever there is an opportunity, and this seems to be a fair one. 3 or 4 years ago, when Szczepanik was 19 or 20 years old, he was a schoolmaster in a Moravian village, on a salary of, I forget the amount, but no matter. There was not enough of it to remember. His head was full of inventions, and in his odd hours he began to plan them out. He soon perfected an ingenious invention for applying photography to pattern designing as used in the textile industries, whereby he proposed to reduce the customary outlay of time, labor, and money expended on that department of loom work to next to nothing. He wanted to carry his project to Vienna and market it, and as he could not get leave of absence, he made his trip without leave. This lost him his place, but did not gain him his market. When his money ran out he went back home, and was presently reinstated. By and by he deserted once more, and went to Vienna, and this time he made some friends who assisted him, and his invention was sold to England and Germany for a great sum. During the past 3 years he has been experimenting and investigating in velvety comfort. His most picturesque achievement is his telelectroscope, a device which a number of able men, including Mr. Edison, I think, had already tried their hands at, with prospects of eventual success. A Frenchman came near to solving the difficult and intricate problem 15 years ago, but an essential detail was lacking which he could not master, and he suffered defeat. Szczepanik's experiments with his pattern-designing project revealed to him the secret of the lacking detail. He perfected his invention, and a French syndicate has bought it, and will save it for exhibition and fortune-making at the Paris World's Fair, when the fair opens by and by. As a schoolmaster Szczepanik was exempt from military duty. When he ceased from teaching, being an educated man, he could have had himself enrolled as a 1-year's volunteer, but he forgot to do it, and this exposed him to the privilege, and also the necessity, of serving 3 years in the army. In the course of duty, the other day, an official discovered the inventor's indebtedness to the state, and took the proper measures to collect. At first there seemed to be no way for the inventor and the state out of the difficulty. The authorities were loath to take the young man out of his great laboratory, where he was helping to shove the whole human race along on its road to new prosperities and scientific conquests, and suspend operations in his mental Klondike 3 years, while he punched the empty air with a bayonet in a time of peace. But there was the law, and how was it to be helped? It was a difficult puzzle, but the authorities labored at it until they found a forgotten law somewhere which furnished a loophole, a large one, and a long one, too, as it looks to me. By this piece of good luck Szczepanik is saved from soldiering, but he becomes a schoolmaster again, and it is a sufficiently picturesque billet when you examine it. He must go back to his village every 2 months and teach his school half a day, from early in the morning until noon, and to the best of my understanding of the published terms he must keep this up the rest of his life. I hope so, just for the romantic poeticalness of it. He is 24, strongly and compactly built, and comes to an ancestry accustomed to waiting to see its great-grandchildren married. It is almost certain that he will live to be 90. I hope so. This promises him 66 years of useful school service. Dissected, it gives him a chance to teach school 396 half-days, make 396 railway trips going and 396 back, pay bed and board 396 times in the village, and lose possibly 1,200 days from his laboratory work. That is to say, 3 years and 3 months or so. And he already owes 3 years to this same account. This has been overlooked. I shall call the attention of the authorities to it. It may be possible for him to get a compromise on this compromise by doing his 3 years in the army and saving one. But I think it can't happen. This government holds the age on him. It has what is technically called a good thing in financial circles, and knows a good thing when it sees it. I know the inventor very well, and he has my sympathy. This is friendship, but I am throwing my influence with the government. This is politics. Stepanik left for his village in Moravia day before yesterday to do time for the first time under his sentence. Early yesterday morning he started for the school in a fine carriage which was stocked with fruits, cakes, toys, and all sorts of knickknacks, rarities, and surprises for the children, and was met on the road by the school and a body of schoolmasters from the neighboring districts, marching in column, with the village authorities at the head, and was received with the enthusiastic welcome proper to the man who had made their village's name celebrated, and conducted in state to the humble doors which had been shut against him as a deserter 3 years before. It is out of materials like these that romances are woven, and when the romancer has done his best, he has not improved upon the unpainted facts. Stepanik put the sapless school-books aside, and led the children a holiday dance through the enchanted lands of science and invention, explaining to them some of the curious things which he had contrived, and the laws which governed their construction and performance, and illustrating these matters with pictures and models and other helps to a clear understanding of their fascinating mysteries. After this there was play, and a distribution of the fruits and toys and things, and after this again some more science, including the story of the invention of the telephone, and an explanation of its character and laws, for the convict had brought a telephone along. The children saw that wonder for the first time, and they also personally tested its powers and verified them. Then school let out. The teacher got his certificate, all signed, stamped, taxed, and so on, said good-bye, and drove off in his carriage under a storm of "Do widzenia" (au revoir) from the children, who will resume their customary sobrieties until he comes in August and uncorks his flask of scientific firewater again. End of The Austrian Edison Keeping School Again, by Mark Twain. Read by John Greenman. This is Section 3 of Mark Twain's Journal Writings, Volume 1. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Canvasser's Tale, by Mark Twain, read by John Greenman. Poor sad-eyed stranger! There was that about his humble mien, his tired look, his decayed gentility clothes, that almost reached the mustard-seed of charity that still remained, remote and lonely, in the empty vastness of my heart, notwithstanding I observed a portfolio under his arm, and said to myself, Behold, Providence hath delivered his servant into the hands of another canvasser. Well, these people always get one interested. Before I well knew how it came about, this one was telling me his history, and I was all attention and sympathy. He told it something like this. My parents died, alas, when I was a little sinless child. My uncle Ithuriel took me to his heart and reared me as his own. He was my only relative in the wide world, but he was good and rich and generous. He reared me in the lap of luxury. I knew no want that money could satisfy. In the fullness of time I was graduated, and went with 2 of my servants, my chamberlain and my valet, to travel in foreign countries. During 4 years I flitted upon careless wing amid the beauteous gardens of the distant Strand, if you will permit this form of speech in one whose tongue was ever attuned to poesy, And indeed I so speak with confidence, as one unto his kind, for I perceive by your eyes that you too, sir, are gifted with the divine inflation. In those far lands I reveled in the ambrosial food that fructifies the soul, the mind, the heart. But of all things that which most appealed to my inborn aesthetic taste was the prevailing custom there among the rich of making collections of elegant and costly rarities, dainty objets de vertu, and in an evil hour I tried to uplift my uncle Ithuriel to a plane of sympathy with this exquisite employment. I wrote and told him of one gentleman's vast collection of shells, another's noble collection of meerschaum pipes, another's elevating and refining collection of undecipherable autographs, another's priceless collection of old china, another's enchanting collection of postage stamps, and so forth and so on. Soon my letters yielded fruit. My uncle began to look about for something to make a collection of. You may know, perhaps, how fleetly a taste like this dilates. His soon became a raging fever, though I knew it not. He began to neglect his great pork business. Presently he wholly retired, and turned an elegant leisure into a rabid search for curious things. His wealth was vast, and he spared it not. First he tried cow-bells. He made a collection which filled 5 large salons, and comprehended all the different sorts of cow-bells that ever had been contrived, save one. That one, an antique, and the only specimen extant, was possessed by another collector. My uncle offered enormous sums for it, but the gentleman would not sell. Doubtless you know what necessarily resulted. A true collector attaches no value to a collection that is not complete. His great heart breaks, he sells his hoard, he turns his mind to some field that seems unoccupied. Thus did my uncle. He next tried brickbats. After piling up a vast and intensely interesting collection, the former difficulty supervened. His great heart broke again. He sold out his soul's idol to the retired brewer who possessed the missing brick. Then he tried flint hatchets and other implements of primeval man, but by and by discovered that the factory where they were made was supplying other collectors as well as himself. He tried Aztec inscriptions and stuffed whales, another failure after incredible labor and expense. When his collection seemed at last perfect, a stuffed whale arrived from Greenland, and an Aztec inscription from the Cundurango regions of Central America that made all former specimens insignificant. My uncle hastened to secure these noble gems. He got the stuffed whale, but another collector got the inscription. A real Cundurango, as possibly you know, is a possession of such supreme value that when once a collector gets it he will rather part with his family than with it. So my uncle sold out, and saw his darlings go forth, never more to return, and his coal-black hair turned white as snow in a single night. Now he waited and thought. He knew another disappointment might kill him. He was resolved that he would choose things next time that no other man was collecting. He carefully made up his mind, and once more entered the field, this time to make a collection of echoes. "Of what?" said I. "Echoes, sir." His first purchase was an echo in Georgia that repeated 4 times. His next was a 6-repeater in Maryland. His next was a 13-repeater in Maine. His next was a 9-repeater in Kansas. His next was a 12-repeater in Tennessee, which he got cheap, so to speak, because it was out of repair, a portion of the crag which reflected it having tumbled down. He believed he could repair it at a cost of a few $1,000s, and, by increasing the elevation with masonry, treble the repeating capacity. But the architect who undertook the job had never built an echo before, and so he utterly spoiled this one. Before he meddled with it, it used to talk back like a mother-in-law, and now it was only fit for the deaf and dumb asylum. Well, next he bought a lot of cheap little double-barreled echoes, scattered around over various states and territories. He got them at 20% off by taking the lot. Next he bought a perfect Gatling gun of an echo in Oregon, and it cost a fortune, I can tell you. You may know, sir, that in the echo market the scale of prices is cumulative, like the carat scale in diamonds. In fact, the same phraseology is used. A single carat echo is worth but $10 over and above the value of the land it is on. A 2-carat or double-barreled echo is worth $30. A 5-carat is worth $950. A 10-carat is worth $13,000. My uncle's Oregon echo, which he called the Great Pit Echo, was a 22-carat gem, and cost $216,000. They threw the land in, for it was 400 miles from a settlement. Well, in the meantime my path was a path of roses. I was the accepted suitor of the only and lovely daughter of an English earl, and was beloved to distraction. In that dear presence I swam in seas of bliss. The family were content, for it was known that I was sole heir to an uncle held to be worth $5 millions. However, none of us knew that my uncle had become a collector, at least in anything more than a small way, for aesthetic amusement. Now gathered the clouds above my unconscious head. That divine echo, since known throughout the world as the great Kohinoor, or Mountain of Repetitions, was discovered. You could utter a word, and it would talk back at you for 15 minutes when the day was otherwise quiet. But behold, another discovery was made at the same time. Another echo collector was in the field. The two rushed to make the purchase. The property consisted of a couple of small hills with a shallow swale between, out yonder among the back settlements of New York State. Both men arrived on the ground at the same time, and neither knew the other was there. The echo was not all owned by one man. A person by the name of Williamson Bolivar Jarvis owned the East Hill, and a person by the name of Harbison J. Bledsoe owned the West Hill. The swale between was the dividing line. So, while my uncle was buying Jarvis's hill for $3,285,000, the other party was buying Bledsoe's hill for a shade over $3 million. Now, do you perceive the natural result? Why, the noblest collection of echoes on earth was forever and ever incomplete, since it possessed but the one-half of the king echo of the universe. Neither man was content with this divided ownership, yet neither would sell to the other. There were jawings, bickerings, heart-burnings, and at last that other collector, with a malignity which only a collector can ever feel toward a man and a brother, proceeded to cut down his hill. You see, as long as he could not have the echo, he was resolved that nobody should have it. He would remove his hill, and then there would be nothing to reflect my uncle's echo. My uncle remonstrated with him, but the man said, "I own one end of this echo. I choose to kill my end. You must take care of your own end yourself." Well, my uncle got an injunction put on him. The other man appealed and fought it in a higher court. They carried it on up clear to the Supreme Court of the United States. It made no end of trouble there. Two of the judges believed that an echo was personal property, because it was impalpable to sight and touch, and yet was purchasable, saleable, and consequently taxable. Two others believed that an echo was real estate, because it was manifestly attached to the land, and was not removable from place to place. Other of the judges contended that an echo was not property at all. It was finally decided that the echo was property, that the hills were property, that the two men were separate and independent owners of the two hills, but tenants in common in the echo. Therefore defendant was at full liberty to cut down his hill, since it belonged solely to him, but must give bonds in $3,000,000 as indemnity for damages which might result to my uncle's half of the echo. This decision also debarred my uncle from using his defendant's hill to reflect his part of the echo without defendant's consent. He must use only his own hill. If his part of the echo would not go, under these circumstances, it was sad, of course, but the court could find no remedy. The court also debarred defendant from using my uncle's hill to reflect his end of the echo without consent. You see the grand result. Neither man would give consent, and so that astonishing and most noble echo had to cease from its great powers, and since that day that magnificent property is tied up and unsaleable. A week before my wedding day, while I was still swimming in bliss, and the nobility were gathering from far and near to honor our espousals, came news of my uncle's death, and also a copy of his will, making me his sole heir. He was gone. Alas, my dear benefactor was no more. The thought surcharges my heart even at this remote day. I handed the will to the Earl. I could not read it for the blinding tears. The Earl read it, then he sternly said, "Sir, do you call this wealth? But doubtless you do in your inflated country. Sir, you are left sole heir to a vast collection of echoes, if a thing can be called a collection that is scattered far and wide over the huge length and breadth of the American continent. Sir, that is not all. You are head and ears in debt. There is not an echo in the lot but has a mortgage on it. Sir, I am not a hard man, but I must look to my child's interest. If you had but one echo which you could honestly call your own, if you had but one echo which was free from encumbrance, so that you could retire to it with my child, and by humble, painstaking industry cultivate and improve it, and thus wrest from it a maintenance, I would not say you nay. But I cannot marry my child to a beggar. Leave his side, my darling. Go, sir. Take your mortgage-ridden echoes and quit my sight forever." My noble Celestine clung to me in tears, with loving arms, and swore she would willingly, nay, gladly marry me though I had not an echo in the world. But it could not be. We were torn asunder. She to pine and die within the 12-month, I to toil life's long journey sad and lone, praying daily, hourly, for that release which shall join us together again in that dear realm where the wicked cease from troubling and the weary are at rest. Now, sir, if you will be so kind as to look at these maps and plans in my portfolio, I am sure I can sell you an echo for less money than any man in the trade. Now this one, which cost my uncle $10 30 years ago, and is one of the sweetest things in Texas, I will let you have for— "Let me interrupt you," I said. "My friend, I have not had a moment's respite from canvassers this day. I have bought a sewing machine which I did not want. I have bought a map which is mistaken in all its details. I have bought a clock which will not go. I have bought a moth poison which the moths prefer to any other beverage. I have bought no end of useless inventions, and now I have had enough of this foolishness. I would not have one of your echoes if you were even to give it to me. I would not let it stay on the place. I always hate a man that tries to sell me echoes. You see this gun? Now take your collection and move on. Let us not have bloodshed." But he only smiled a sad, sweet smile, and got out some more diagrams. You know the result perfectly well, because you know that when you have once opened the door to a canvasser, The trouble is done, and you have got to suffer defeat. I compromised with this man at the end of an intolerable hour. I bought 2 double-barreled echoes in good condition, and he threw in another, which he said was not saleable because it only spoke German. He said she was a perfect polyglot once, but somehow her palate got down. Mark Twain. End of The Canvasser's Tale, read by John Greenman. This is Section 4 of Mark Twain's Journal Writings, Volume 1, read by John Greenman. The Czar's Soliloquy, by Mark Twain. After the Czar's morning bath it is his habit to meditate an hour before dressing himself. London Times Correspondence. Viewing himself in the pier-glass. Naked, what am I? A lank, skinny, spider-legged libel on the image of God. Look at the wax-work head, the face with the expression of a melon, the projecting ears, the knotted elbows, the dished breast, the knife-edged shins, and then the feet, all beads and joints and bone sprays, an imitation X-ray photograph. There is nothing imperial about this, nothing imposing, impressive, nothing to invoke awe and reverence. Is it this that 140 million Russians kiss the dust before and worship? Manifestly not. No one could worship this spectacle, which is me. Then who is it, what is it, that they worship? Privately, none knows better than I. It is my clothes. Without my clothes, I should be as destitute of authority as any other naked person. Nobody could tell me from a parson, a barber, a dude. Then who is the real Emperor of Russia? My clothes. There is no other. As Teufelsdrock suggested, what would man be, what would any man be, without his clothes? As soon as one stops and thinks over that proposition, one realizes that without his clothes a man would be nothing at all, that the clothes do not merely make the man, the clothes are the man, that without them he is a cipher, a vacancy, a nobody, a nothing. Titles, another artificiality, are a part of his clothing. They and the dry goods conceal the wearer's inferiority and make him seem great and a wonder, when at bottom there is nothing remarkable about him. They can move a nation to fall on its knees and sincerely worship an emperor who, without the clothes and the title, would drop to the rank of the cobbler and be swallowed up and lost sight of in the massed multitude of the inconsequentials. An emperor who, naked in a naked world, would get no notice, excite no remark, and be heedlessly shouldered and jostled like any other uncertified stranger, and perhaps offered a kopeck to carry somebody's gripsack. Yet an emperor who, by the sheer might of those artificialities, clothes, and a title, can get himself worshipped as a deity by his people, and at his pleasure and unrebuked can exile them, hunt them, harry them, destroy them, just as he would with so many rats if the accident of birth had furnished him a calling better suited to his capacities than emperring. It is a stupendous force, that which resides in the all-concealing cloak of clothes and title. They fill the onlooker with awe. They make him tremble. Yet he knows that every hereditary regal dignity commemorates a usurpation, a power illegitimately acquired, an authority conveyed and conferred by persons who did not own it. For monarchs have been chosen and elected by aristocracies only.
A nation has never elected one. There is no power without clothes. It is the power that governs the human race. Strip its chiefs to the skin, and no state could be governed. Naked officials could exercise no authority. They would look and be, like everybody else, commonplace, inconsequential. A policeman in plain clothes is one man. In his uniform he is 10. Clothes and title are the most potent thing, the most formidable influence in the earth. They move the human race to willing and spontaneous respect for the judge, the general, the admiral, the bishop, the ambassador, the frivolous earl, the idiot duke, the sultan, the king, the emperor. No great title is efficient without clothes to support it. In naked tribes of savages, the kings wear some kind of rag or decoration which they make sacred to themselves and allow no one else to wear. The king of the great Fan tribe wears a bit of leopard skin on his shoulder. It is sacred to royalty. The rest of him is perfectly naked. Without his bit of leopard skin to awe and impress the people, he would not be able to keep his job.
After a silence,
A curious invention, an unaccountable invention, the human race. The swarming Russian millions have for centuries meekly allowed our family to rob them, insult them, trample them underfoot, while they lived and suffered and died with no purpose and no function but to make that family comfortable. These people are horses, just that, horses with clothes and a religion. A horse with the strength of 100 men will let one man beat him, starve him, drive him. The Russian millions allow a mere handful of soldiers to hold them in slavery, and these very soldiers are their own sons and brothers. A strange thing when one considers it. To wit, the world applies to Czar and system the same moral axioms that have vogue and acceptance in civilized countries. Because in civilized countries it is wrong to remove oppressors otherwise than by process of law, it is held that the same rule applies in Russia, where there is no such thing as law, except for our family. Laws are merely restraints. They have no other function. In civilized countries they restrain all persons, and restrain them all alike, which is fair and righteous. But in Russia such laws as exist make an exception, our family. We do as we please. We have done as we pleased for centuries. Our common trade has been crime, our common pastime murder, our common beverage blood, the blood of the nation. Upon our heads lie millions of murders, yet the pious moralist says it is a crime to assassinate us. We and our uncles are a family of cobras set over 140 million rabbits, whom we torture and murder and feed upon all our days. Yet the moralist urges that to kill us is a crime, not a duty. It is not for me to say it aloud, but to one on the inside, like me, this is naively funny, on its face illogical. Our family is above all law. There is no law that can reach us, restrain us, protect the people from us. Therefore we are outlaws. Outlaws are a proper mark for anyone's bullet. Ah, what could our family do without the moralist? He has always been our stay, our support, our friend. Today he is our only friend. Whenever there has been dark talk of assassination, he has come forward and saved us with his impressive maxim, "Forbear, nothing politically valuable was ever yet achieved by violence." He probably believes it. It is because he has by him no child's book of world history to teach him that his maxim lacks the backing of statistics. All thrones have been established by violence. No regal tyranny has ever been overthrown except by violence. By violence my fathers set up our throne. By murder, treachery, perjury, torture, banishment, and the prison, they have held it for 4 centuries, and by these same arts I hold it today. There is no Romanoff of learning and experience but would reverse the maxim and say, "Nothing politically valuable was ever yet achieved except by violence." The moralist realizes that today, for the first time in our history, my throne is in real peril and the nation waking up from its immemorial slave lethargy. But he does not perceive that 4 deeds of violence are the reason for it: the assassination of the Finland Constitution by my hand, the slaughter by revolutionary assassins of Bobrikov and Plehve, and my massacre of the unoffending innocents the other day. But the blood that flows in my veins, blood informed, trained, educated by its grim heredities, blood alert by its traditions, blood which has been to school 400 years in the veins of professional assassins, my predecessors, it perceives, it understands. Those 4 deeds have set up a commotion in the inert and muddy deeps of the national heart such as no moral suasion could have accomplished. They have aroused hatred and hope in that long atrophied heart, and little by little, slowly but surely, that feeling will steal into every breast and possess it. In time, into even the soldier's breast. Fatal day, day of doom, that. By and by there will be results. How little the academical moralist knows of the tremendous moral force of massacre and assassination. Indeed, there are going to be results. The nation is in labor, and by there will be a mighty birth, patriotism. To put it in rude, plain, unpalatable words, true patriotism, real patriotism. Loyalty not to a family and a fiction, but loyalty to the nation itself. There are 25 million families in Russia. There is a man-child at every mother's knee. If these were 25 million patriotic mothers, they would teach these man-children daily, saying, "Remember this, take it to heart, live by it, die for it if necessary, that our patriotism is medieval, outworn, obsolete, that the modern patriotism, the true patriotism, the only rational patriotism, is loyalty to the nation all the time, loyalty to the government when it deserves it." With 25 million taught and trained patriots in the land a generation from now, my successor would think twice before he would butcher 1,000 helpless poor petitioners humbly begging for his kindness and justice, as I did the other day. Reflective pause. Well, perhaps I have been affected by these depressing newspaper clippings which I found under my pillow. I will read and ponder them again. Reads. Polish women knouted. Reservists' wives treated with awful brutality, at least 1 killed. Special cable to the New York Times. Berlin, November 27. Infuriated by the unwillingness of the Polish troops to leave their wives and children, the Russian authorities at Kutno, a town on the Polish frontier, have treated the people in a manner almost incredibly cruel. It is known that 1 woman has been knouted to death and that a number of others have been injured. 50 persons have been thrown into jail. Some of the prisoners were tortured into unconsciousness. Details of the brutalities are lacking, but it seems that the Cossacks tore the reservists from the arms of their wives and children and then knouted the women who followed their husbands into the streets. In cases where reservists could not be found, their wives were dragged by their hair into the streets and there beaten. The chief official of the district and the colonel of a regiment are said to have looked on while this was being done. A girl who had assisted in distributing socialist tracts was treated in an atrocious manner. Czar as Lord's Anointed. People spent night in prayer and fasting before his visit to Novgorod. London Times, New York Times, special cablegram. Copyright 1904, The New York Times. London, July 27. The London Times Russian correspondents say the following extract from the Petersburger Zeitung, describing the Czar's recent doings at Novgorod, affords a typical instance of the servile adulation which the subjects of the Czar deem it necessary to adopt. The blessing of the troops who knelt devoutly before His Majesty was a profoundly moving spectacle. His Majesty held the sacred icon aloft and pronounced aloud a blessing in his own name and that of the Empress. Thousands wept with emotion and spiritual ecstasy. Pupils of girls' schools scattered roses in the path of the monarch. People pressed up to the carriage in order to carry away an indelible memory of the hallowed features of the Lord's Anointed. Many old people had spent the night in prayer and fasting in order to be worthy to gaze at his countenance with pure, undefiled souls. The greatest enthusiasm prevails at the happiness thus vouchsafed to the people. Moved. How shameful, how pitiful, and how grotesque to think it was I that did those cruel things. There is no escaping the personal responsibility. It was I that did them, and it was I that got that groveling and awe-smitten worship. I, this thing in the mirror, this carrot. With one hand I flogged unoffending women to death and tortured prisoners to unconsciousness, and with the other I held up the fetish toward my fellow deity in heaven, and called down his blessing upon my adoring animals whom, and whose forbears, with his holy approval, I and mine have been instructing in the pains of hell for 4 lagging centuries. It is a picture. To think that this thing in the mirror, this vegetable, is an accepted deity to a mighty nation, an innumerable host, and nobody laughs, and at the same time is a diligent and practical professional devil, and nobody marvels, nobody murmurs about incongruities and inconsistencies. Is the human race a joke? Was it devised and patched together in a dull time when there was nothing more important to do? Has it no respect for itself? I think my respect for it is drooping, sinking, and my respect for myself along with it. There is but one restorative: clothes. Respect reviving, spirit uplifting clothes. Heaven's kindliest gift to man, his only protection against finding himself out. They deceive him, they confer dignity upon him. Without them he has none. How charitable are clothes, how beneficent, how puissant, how inestimably precious! Mine are able to expand a human cipher into a globe-shadowing portent. They can command the respect of the whole world, including my own, which is fading. I will put them on. Mark Twain. End of The Czar's Soliloquy, by Mark Twain. Read by John Greenman. This is Section 5 of Mark Twain's Journal Writings, Volume 1.
This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. English as She is Taught by Mark Twain. Read by John Greenman. In the appendix to Crocker's Boswell's Johnson, one finds this anecdote: Cato's Soliloquy. One day Mrs. Gastrell set a little girl to repeat to him, Dr. Samuel Johnson, Cato's Soliloquy, which she went through very correctly. The doctor, after a pause, asked the child, "What was to bring Cato to an end?" She said it was a knife. "No, my dear, it was not so." "My Aunt Polly said it was a knife." "Why, Aunt Polly's knife may do, but it was a dagger, my dear." He then asked her the meaning of bane and antidote, which she was unable to give. Mrs. Gastrell said, "You cannot expect so young a child to know the meaning of such words." He then said, "My dear, how many pence are there in sixpence?" "I cannot tell, sir," was the half-terrified reply. On this, addressing himself to Mrs. Gastrell, he said, "Now, my dear lady, can anything be more ridiculous than to teach a child Cato's Soliloquy who does not know how many pence there are in sixpence?" In a lecture before the Royal Geographical Society, Professor Ravenstein quoted the following list of frantic questions, and said that they had been asked in an examination: "Mention all the names of places in the world derived from Julius Caesar or Augustus Caesar." "Where are the following rivers: Pisuerga, Sagaria, Guadalete, Chalon, Mulde?" "All you know of the following: Machacha, Pilmo, Chebulos, Krivosia, Basex, Manakert, Taxhen, Citeaux, Meloria, Zutphen." "The highest peaks of the Karakorum range." "The number of universities in Prussia." "Why are the tops of mountains continually covered with snow?" Sick. "Name the length and breadth of the streams of lava which issued from the Skaptar Jokul in the eruption of 1783. That list would oversize nearly anybody's geographical knowledge. Isn't it reasonably possible that in our schools many of the questions in all studies are several miles ahead of where the pupil is? That he is set to struggle with things that are ludicrously beyond his present reach, hopelessly beyond his present strength? This remark in passing, and by way of text. Now I come to what I was going to say. I have just now fallen upon a darling literary curiosity. It is a little book, a manuscript compilation, and the compiler sent it to me with the request that I say whether I think it ought to be published or not. I said yes, but as I slowly grow wise, I briskly grow cautious, and so, now that the publication is imminent, it has seemed to me that I should feel more comfortable if I could divide up this responsibility with the public by adding them to the court. Therefore I will print some extracts from the book, in the hope that they may make converts to my judgment that the volume has merit which entitles it to publication. As to its character, every one has sampled English as she is spoke and English as she is wrote. This little volume furnishes us an instructive array of examples of English as she is taught in the public schools of, this country. The collection is made by a teacher in those schools, and all the examples in it are genuine. None of them have been tampered with or doctored in any way. From time to time, during several years, whenever a pupil has delivered himself of anything peculiarly quaint or toothsome in the course of his recitations,
This teacher and her associates have privately set that thing down in a memorandum book, strictly following the original as to grammar, construction, spelling, and all, and the result is this literary curiosity. The contents of the book consist mainly of answers given by the boys and girls to questions, said answers being given sometimes verbally, sometimes in writing. The subjects touched upon are 15 in number: 1. Etymology. 2. Grammar. 3. Mathematics. 4. Geography. 5. Original. 6. Analysis. 7. History. 8. Intellectual. 9. Philosophy. 10. Physiology. 11. Astronomy. 12. Politics. 13. Music. 14. Oratory. 15. Metaphysics. You perceive that the poor little young idea has taken a shot at a good many kinds of game in the course of the book. Now as to results. Here are some quaint definitions of words. It will be noticed that in all of these instances the sound of the word or the look of it on paper has misled the child. Aborigines. A system of mountains. Alias. A good man in the Bible. Amenable. Anything that is mean. Assiduity. State of being an acid. Auriferous. Pertaining to an orifice. Ammonia. The food of the gods. Capillary. A little caterpillar. Corniferous. Rocks in which fossil corn is found. Emolument. A headstone to a grave. Equestrian. One who asks questions. Eucharist. One who plays euchre. Franchise. Anything belonging to the French. Idolator. A very idle person. Ipecac. A man who likes a good dinner. Irrigate. To make fun of. Mendacious. What can be mended. Mercenary. One who feels for another. Parasite. A kind of umbrella. Parasite. The murder of an infant. Publican. A man who does his prayers in public. Tenacious. 10 acres of land. Here is one where the phrase publicans and sinners has got mixed up in the child's mind with politics, and the result is a definition which takes one in a sudden and unexpected way. Republican. A sinner mentioned in the Bible. Also in Democratic newspapers now and then. Here are 2 where the mistake has resulted from sound assisted by remote fact. Plagiarist. A writer of plays. Demagogue. A vessel containing beer and other liquids. I cannot quite make out what it was that misled the pupil in the following instances. It would not seem to have been the sound of the word, nor the look of it in print. Asphyxia. A grumbling, fussy temper. Quaternions. A bird with a flat beak and no bill, living in New Zealand. Quaternions. The name given to a style of art practiced by the Phoenicians. Quaternions. A religious convention held every 100 years. Sibilant. The state of being idiotic. Crosier. A staff carried by the deity. In the following sentences the pupil's ear has been deceiving him again. The marriage was illegible. He was totally dismasted with the whole performance. He enjoys riding on a philosopher. She was very quick at repertoire. He prayed for the waters to subsidize. The leopard is watching his sheep. They had a strawberry vestibule. Here is one which, well, now, how often we do slam right into the truth without ever suspecting it. The men employed by the gas company go round and speculate the meter. Indeed they do, dear. And when you grow up, many and many's the time you will notice it in the gas bill. In the following sentences, the little people have some information to convey every time, but in my case they failed to connect. The light always went out on the keystone word. The coercion of some things is remarkable, as bread and molasses. Her hat is contiguous because she wears it on one side. He preached to an egregious congregation. The captain eliminated a bullet through the man's heart. You should take caution and be precarious. The supercilious girl acted with vicissitude when the perennial time came. That last is a curiously plausible sentence. One seems to know what it means, and yet he knows all the time that he doesn't. Here is an odd but entirely proper use of a word, and a most sudden descent from a lofty philosophical altitude to a very practical and homely illustration. We should endeavor to avoid extremes, like those of wasps and bees. And here, with zoological and geological in his mind, but not ready to his tongue, the small scholar has innocently gone and let out a couple of secrets which ought never to have been divulged in any circumstances. There are a good many donkeys in theological gardens. Some of the best fossils are found in theological cabinets. Under the head of grammar, the little scholars furnish the following information. Gender is the distinguishing nouns without regard to sex. A verb is something to eat. Adverbs should always be used as adjectives and adjectives as adverbs. Every sentence and name of God must begin with a caterpillar. Caterpillar is well enough, but capital letter would have been stricter. The following is a brave attempt at a solution, but it failed to liquefy. When they are going to say some prose or poetry before they say the poetry or prose, they must put a semicolon just after the introduction of the prose or poetry. The chapter on mathematics is full of fruit. For it I take a few samples, mainly in an unripe state. A straight line is any distance between two places. Parallel lines are lines that can never meet until they run together. A circle is a round straight line with a hole in the middle. Things which are equal to each other are equal to anything else. To find the number of square feet in a room, you multiply the room by the number of the feet. The product is the result. Right you are. In the matter of geography this little book is unspeakably rich. The questions do not appear to have applied the microscope to the subject, as did those quoted by Professor Ravenstein. Still, they proved plenty difficult enough without that. These pupils did not hunt with a microscope, they hunted with a shotgun. This is shown by the crippled condition of the game they brought in. America is divided into the Pacific slope and the Mississippi Valley. North America is separated by Spain. America consists from north to south about 500 miles. The United States is quite a small country compared with some other countries, but is about as industrious. The capital of the United States is Long Island. The 5 seaports of the U.S. are Newfoundland and San Francisco. The principal products of the U.S. is earthquakes and volcanoes. The Alleghenies are mountains in Philadelphia. The Rocky Mountains are on the western side of Philadelphia. Cape Hatteras is a vast body of water surrounded by land and flowing into the Gulf of Mexico. Mason and Dixon's line is the equator. One of the leading industries of the United States is molasses, book covers, numbers, gas, teaching, lumber, manufacturers, paper-making, publishers, coal. In Austria, the principal occupation is gathering ostrich feathers. Gibraltar is an island built on a rock. Russia is very cold and tyrannical. Sicily is one of the Sandwich Islands. Hindustan flows through the Ganges and empties into the Mediterranean Sea. Ireland is called the Emigrant Isle because it is so beautiful and green. The width of the different zones Europe lies in depend upon the surrounding country. The imports of a country are the things that are paid for, the exports are the things that are not. Climate lasts all the time, and weather only a few days. The two most famous volcanoes of Europe are Sodom and Gomorrah. The chapter headed Analysis shows us that the pupils in our public schools are not merely loaded up with those showy facts about geography, mathematics, and so on, and left in that incomplete state. No, there's machinery for clarifying and expanding their minds. They are required to take poems and analyze them, dig out their common sense, reduce them to statistics, and reproduce them in a luminous prose translation which shall tell you at a glance what the poet was trying to get at. One sample will do. Here is a stanza from The Lady of the Lake, followed by the pupil's impressive explanation of it. Alone, but with unbated zeal, the horseman plied with scourge and steel, for jaded now and spent with toil, embossed with foam and dark with soil, while every gasp with sobs he drew, the laboring stag strained full in view. The man who rode on the horse performed the whip, and an instrument made of steel alone, with strong ardor not diminishing. For, being tired from the time passed with hard labor, overworked with anger, and ignorant with weariness, while every breath for labor he drew with cries full of sorrow, the young deer made imperfect who worked hard filtered in sight. I see now that I never understood that poem before. I have had glimpses of its meaning in moments when I was not as ignorant with weariness as usual, but this is the first time the whole spacious idea of it ever filtered in sight. If I were a public school pupil, I would put those other studies aside and stick to analysis, for, after all, it is the thing to spread your mind. We come now to historical matters, historical remains, one might say. As one turns the pages he is impressed with the depth to which one date has been driven into the American child's head: 1492. The date is there, and it is there to stay, and it is always at hand, always deliverable at a moment's notice. But the fact that belongs with it, that is quite another matter. Only the date itself is familiar and sure, its vast fact has failed of lodgment. It would appear that whenever you ask a public school pupil when a thing, anything no matter what, happened, and he is in doubt, he always rips out his 1492. He applies it to everything, from the landing of the Ark to the introduction of the horse-car. Well, after all, it is our first date, and so it is right enough to honor it, and pay the public schools to teach our children to honor it. George Washington was born in 1492. Washington wrote the Declaration of Independence in 1492. St. Bartholomew was massacred in 1492. The Britons were the Saxons who entered England in 1492 under Julius Caesar. The earth is 1,492 miles in circumference. To proceed with history, Christopher Columbus was called the father of his country. Queen Isabella of Spain sold her watch and chain and other millinery so that Columbus could discover America. The Indian wars were very desecrating to the country. The Indians pursued their warfare by hiding in the bushes and then scalping them. Captain John Smith has been styled the father of his country. His life was saved by his daughter Pocahontas. The Puritans found an insane asylum in the wilds of America. The Stamp Act was to make everybody stamp all materials so they should be null and void. Washington died in Spain almost broken-hearted. His remains were taken to the cathedral in Havana. Guerrilla warfare was where men rode on gorillas. John Brown was a very good insane man who tried to get fugitive slaves into Virginia. He captured all the inhabitants, but was finally conquered and condemned to his death. The Confederacy was formed by the fugitive slaves. Alfred the Great reigned 872 years. He was distinguished for letting some buckwheat cakes burn, and the lady scolded him. Henry VIII was famous for being a great widower, having lost several wives. Lady Jane Grey studied Greek and Latin and was beheaded after a few days. John Bright is noted for an incurable disease. Lord James Gordon Bennett instigated the Gordon riots. The Middle Ages come in between antiquity and posterity. Luther introduced Christianity into England a good many thousand years ago. His birthday was November 1883. He was once a pope. He lived at the time of the Rebellion of Worms. Julius Caesar is noted for his famous telegram dispatch, "I came, I saw, I conquered." Julius Caesar was really a very great man. He was a very great soldier and wrote a book for beginners in the Latin. Cleopatra was caused by the death of an asp, which she dissolved in a wine cup. The only form of government in Greece was a limited monkey. The Persian War lasted about 500 years. Greece had only 7 wise men. Socrates destroyed some statues and had to drink shamrock. Here is a fact correctly stated, and yet it is phrased with such ingenious infelicity that it can be depended upon to convey misinformation every time it is uncarefully read. By the Salic law, no woman or descendant of a woman could occupy the throne. To show how far a child can travel in history with judicious and diligent boosting in the public school, we select the following mosaic. Abraham Lincoln was born in Wales in 1599. In the chapter headed Intellectual, I find a great number of most interesting statements. A sample or two may be found not amiss. Bracebridge Hall was written by Henry Irving. Snowbound was written by Peter Cooper. The House of the Seven Gables was written by Lord Bryant. Edgar A. Poe was a very curdling writer. Cotton Mather was a writer who invented the cotton gin and wrote histories. Beowulf wrote the Scriptures. Ben Jonson survived Shakespeare in some respects. In the Canterbury Tale it gives account of King Alfred on his way to the shrine of Thomas Bucket. Chaucer was the father of English pottery. Chaucer was a bland verse writer of the 3rd century. Chaucer was succeeded by H. Wads Longfellow, an American writer. His writings were chiefly prose, and nearly 100 years elapsed. Shakespeare translated the Scriptures, and it was called St. James because he did it. In the middle of the chapter I find many pages of information concerning Shakespeare's plays, Milton's plays, and those of Bacon, Addison, Samuel Johnson, Fielding, Richardson, Sterne, Smollett, Defoe, Locke, Pope, Swift, Goldsmith, Burns, Cowper, Wordsworth, Gibbon, Byron, Coleridge, Hood, Scott, Macaulay, George Eliot, Dickens, Bulwer, Thackeray, Browning, Mrs. Browning, Tennyson, and Disraeli, a fact which shows that into the restricted stomach of the public school pupil is shoveled every year the blood, bone, and viscera of a gigantic literature, and the same is there digested and disposed of in a most successful and characteristic and gratifying public school way. I have space for but a trifling few of the results. Lord Byron was the son of an heiress and a drunken man. William Wordsworth wrote The Barefoot Boy and Imitations on Immortality. Gibbon wrote a history of his travels in Italy. This was original. George Eliot left a wife and children who mourned greatly for his genius. George Eliot, Miss Mary Evans, Mrs. Cross, Mrs. Lewis, was the greatest female poet unless George Sandys is made an exception of. Bulwell is considered a good writer. Sir Walter Scott, Charles Bronte, Alfred the Great, and Johnson were the first great novelists. Thomas Babington Macaulay graduated at Harvard and then studied law. He was raised to the peerage as baron in 1557 and died in 1776. Here are 2 or 3 miscellaneous facts that may be of value if taken in moderation. Homer's writings are Homer's essays, Virgil the Aeneid, and Paradise Lost. Some people say that these poems were not written by Homer but by another man of the same name. A sort of sadness kind of shone in Bryant's poems. Holmes is a very profligate and amusing writer. When the public school pupil wrestles with the political features of the great republic, they throw him sometimes. A bill becomes a law when the President vetoes it. The 3 departments of the government is the President rules the world, the Governor rules the State, the Mayor rules the city. The first conscientious Congress met in Philadelphia. The Constitution of the United States was established to ensure domestic hostility. Truth, crushed to earth, will rise again, as follows. The Constitution of the United States is that part of the book at the end which nobody reads. And here she rises once more, and untimely. There should be a limit to public school instruction. It cannot be wise or well to let the young find out everything. Congress is divided into civilized, half-civilized, and savage. Here are some results of study in music and oratory. An interval in music is the distance on the keyboard from one piano to the next. A rest means you are not to sing it. Emphasis is putting more distress on one word than another. The chapter on physiology contains much that ought not to be lost to science. Physiology is to study about your bones, stomach, and vertebrae. Occupations which are injurious to health are carbolic acid gas, which is impure blood. We have an upper and lower skin. The lower skin moves all the time, and the upper skin moves when we do. The body is mostly composed of water, and about 1/2 is avaricious tissue. The stomach is a small pear-shaped bone situated in the body. The gastric juice keeps the bones from creaking. The chyle flows up the middle of the backbone and reaches the heart, where it meets the oxygen and is purified. The salivary glands are used to salivate the body. In the stomach, starch is changed to cane sugar, and cane sugar to sugar cane. The olfactory nerve enters the cavity of the orbit and is developed into the special sense of hearing. The growth of a tooth begins in the back of the mouth and extends to the stomach. If we were on a railroad track and a train was coming, the train would deafen our ears so that we couldn't see to get off the track. If, up to this point, none of my quotations have added flavor to the Johnsonian anecdote at the head of this article, let us make another attempt. The theory that intuitive truths are discovered by the light of nature originated from St. John's interpretation of a passage in the Gospel of Plato. The weight of the earth is found by comparing a mass of known lead with that of a mass of unknown lead. To find the weight of the earth, take the length of a degree on a meridian and multiply by 62½ pounds. The spheres are to each other as the squares of their homologous sides. A body will go just as far in the first second as the body will go plus the force of gravity, and that's equal to twice what the body will go. Specific gravity is the weight to be compared weight of an equal volume of, or, that is, the weight of a body compared with the weight of an equal volume. The law of fluid pressure divide the different forms of organized bodies by the form of attraction, and the number increased will be the form. Inertia is that property of bodies by virtue of which it cannot change its own condition of rest or motion. In other words, it is the negative quality of passiveness either in recoverable latency or incipient latescence. If a laugh is fair here, not the struggling child nor the unintelligent teacher, or rather the unintelligent boards, committees, and trustees are the proper target for it. All through this little book one detects the signs of a certain probable fact, that a large part of the pupil's instruction consists in cramming him with obscure and wordy rules, which he does not understand and has no time to understand. It would be as useful to cram him with brickbats. They would at least stay. In a town in the interior of New York a few years ago, a gentleman set forth a mathematical problem and proposed to give a prize to every public school pupil who should furnish the correct solution of it. 22 of the brightest boys in the public schools entered the contest. The problem was not a very difficult one for pupils of their mathematical rank and standing, yet they all failed, by a hair, through one trifling mistake or another. Some searching questions were asked, when it turned out that these lads were as glib as parrots with the rules, but could not reason out a single rule or explain the principle underlying it. Their memories had been stocked, but not their understandings. It was a case of brickbat culture, pure and simple. There are several curious compositions in the little book, and we must make room for one. It is full of naivete, brutal truth, and unembarrassed directness, and is the funniest, genuine boy's composition I think I have ever seen. On Girls. Girls are very stuck-up and dignified in their manner, and have-youer. They think more of dress than anything, and like to play with dowels and rags. They cry if they see a cow in a far distance, and are afraid of guns. They stay at home all the time, and go to church on Sunday. They are always sick. They are always foony, and making fun of boys' hands, and they say how dirty. They can't play marbles. I pity them, poor things. They make fun of boys, and then turn round and love them. I don't believe they ever killed a cat or anything. They look out every night and say, "Oh, Aunt the Moon Lovely." There is one thing I have not told, and that is they always know their lessons better'n boys.
from Mr. Edward Channing's recent article in Science, "The marked difference between the books now being produced by French, English, and American travelers, on the one hand, and German explorers on the other, is too great to escape attention. That difference is due entirely to the fact that in school and university the German is taught, in the first place, to see, and in the second place to understand what he does see." Mark Twain. End of English as She is Taught, by Mark Twain. Read by John Greenman. This is Section 6 of Mark Twain's Journal Writings, Volume 1, by Mark Twain. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Grasses in the South, by Mark Twain, read by John Greenman.
The following is taken from that able and excellent weekly, the Mobile Sunday Times, whose agricultural columns are edited by C. C. Langdon, Esquire. The following communication is from a veteran Southern agriculturist, a gentleman of high character and great intelligence, who, before the war, was not only a large cotton planter, but at the same time a successful farmer, horticulturist, pomologist, and stock-raiser. No man in the South has done more than he to prove the perfect adaptation of our soil and climate to that diversification of pursuits which the stern logic of events has rendered necessary to the future prosperity of the land we love. We will vouch for the entire truthfulness of all the statements of our correspondent. What he has done, others can do, if they will. Stonewall, Mississippi, May 21, 1868. Hon. C. C. Langdon: Under your department in the Sunday Times I read, "The cotton theorists hold that farm products and the rearing of horses, cattle, hogs, etc., cannot be made to pay, or to compete with colder climates, because they say that the grasses cannot endure the heat and dryness of our long summers. I am satisfied that this is a mistake, and I feel certain that no scientific and careful test has yet been made of the fitness of our climate for these, I will call them, pastural grasses." See page 6, May 17, signed Ben Lane. Will you allow Mark Twain to say he had clover in 1837 and up to May 1863, when he abdicated his high calling in favor of the hired foreign soldiery of "the best government the world ever saw"? There may have been no scientific and careful tests, but nevertheless for over 20 years in latitude 32 degrees I had the clovers, having tried the red, white, yellow, scarlet, as also of the grasses blue, timothy, orchard, redtop, and largely of the Bermuda, at least enough of pastural grasses. I call them the cultivated grasses, to distinguish them from the wild grasses or natures, though some of these do not succeed unless the land is in a state of culture, the crab and crowfoot, for instance. If Ben Lane had visited Mark Twain from 1840 to 1860, he would have seen those grasses, and I, a cotton theorist, affirm after 35 years' experience, no science, in the cotton field, that we cannot compete with colder climates, the same policy pursued. Change the policy, put the land in a state of drainage, when it will bear subsoiling 12 to 18 inches deep, then sow the grasses profusely, and Mark Twain pledges his good name that no climate outside of the ruinated, spoiled Confederacy can compete with us. When I left never to return to my home, I had largely, for my means, horses, cattle, hogs, sheep, and goats, never permitting one of them outside of my fence unless taken out for use. I had brood mares, a pure Morgan stallion, an imported jack, thoroughbred Devon bulls, thoroughbred imported Ayrshire bulls, and sent off just before I dodged out, after the clock on my mantel chimed "Low 12," and lay out in the swamp until peep o' day, and left forever a Southdown ram imported in his dam. He cost only $600 with Southdown and pure Saxon and Merino ewes. Sufficient. I had over 100 head of horses, mules, colts, and fine cattle, that never needed to be fed from corn house or barn, there being pastural grasses enough for them 365 days in each year. Others can do this if they will, and until Southern men become planters and look the necessity of the thing square in the face and act up to duty, we will be always dependent upon the Northern men and the Eastern, who have no more love for me, us, than we, have for them. I use somebody's fictitious name for this time. Mark Twain.
End of Grasses in the South by Mark Twain, read by John Greenman. This is Section 7 of Mark Twain's Journal Writings, Volume 1, by Mark Twain. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Hawaii, by Mark Twain, read by John Greenman.
No alien land in all the world has any deep, strong charm for me but that one. No other land could so longingly and beseechingly haunt me, sleeping and waking, through half a lifetime, as that one has done. Other things leave me, but it abides. Other things change, but it remains the same. For me, its balmy airs are always blowing, its summer seas flashing in the sun. The pulsing of its surf beat is in my ear. I can see its garland crags, its leaping cascades, its plumy palms drowsing by the shore, its remote summits floating like islands above the cloud-rack. I can feel the spirit of its woodland solitude. I can hear the plash of its brooks. In my nostrils still lives the breath of flowers that perished 20 years ago. Mark Twain. End of Hawaii by Mark Twain, read by John Greenman. This is Section 8 of Mark Twain's Journal Writings, Volume 1, by Mark Twain. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. A Helpless Situation by Mark Twain, read by John Greenman. Once or twice a year I get a letter of a certain pattern, a pattern that never materially changes in form and substance, yet I cannot get used to that letter. It always astonishes me. It affects me as the locomotive always affects me. I say to myself, I have seen you 1,000 times. You always look the same way, yet you are always a wonder, and you are always impossible. To contrive you is clearly beyond human genius. You can't exist. You don't exist, yet here you are. I have a letter of that kind by me, a very old one. I yearn to print it, and where is the harm? The writer of it is dead years ago, no doubt, and if I conceal her name and address, her this-world address, I am sure her shade will not mind. And with it I wish to print the answer which I wrote at the time, but probably did not send. If it went, which is not likely, it went in the form of a copy, for I find the original still here, pigeon-holed with the said letter. To that kind of letters we all write answers which we do not send, fearing to hurt where we have no desire to hurt. And I have done it many a time, and this is doubtless a case of the sort. The letter. X, California, June 3, 1879. Mr. S. L. Clemens, Hartford, Connecticut. Dear Sir, you will doubtless be surprised to know who has presumed to write and ask a favor of you. Let your memory go back to your days in the Humboldt mines, 62, 63. You will remember you and Clagett and Oliver and the old blacksmith Toulouse lived in a lean-to which was halfway up the gulch, and there were 6 log cabins in the camp, strung pretty well separated up the gulch from its mouth at the desert to where the last claim was, at the divide. The lean-to you lived in was the one with a canvas roof that the cow fell down through one night, as told about by you in Roughing It. My Uncle Simmons remembers it very well. He lived in the principal cabin, halfway up the divide, along with Dixon and Parker and Smith. It had 2 rooms, one for kitchen and the other for bunks, and was the only one that had. You and your party were there on the great night, the time they had dried apple pie. Uncle Simmons often speaks of it. It seems curious that dried apple pie should have seemed such a great thing, but it was, and it shows how far Humboldt was out of the world and difficult to get to, and how slim the regular bill of fare was. 16 years ago, it is a long time. I was a little girl then, only 14. I never saw you. I lived in Washoe. But Uncle Simmons ran across you every now and then, all during those weeks that you and party were there working your claim, which was like the rest. The camp played out long and long ago. There wasn't silver enough in it to make a button. You never saw my husband, but he was there after you left, and lived in that very lean-to. A bachelor then, but married to me now. He often wishes there had been a photographer there in those days. He would have taken the lean-to. He got hurt in the old Hal Clayton claim that was abandoned like the others, putting in a blast and not climbing out quick enough, though he scrambled the best he could. It landed him clear down on the trail and hit a Paiute. For weeks they thought he would not get over it, but he did, and is all right now. Has been ever since. This is a long introduction, but it is the only way I can make myself known. The favor I ask I feel assured your generous heart will grant. Give me some advice about a book I have written. I do not claim anything for it, only it is mostly true, and as interesting as most of the books of the times. I am unknown in the literary world, and you know what that means unless one has someone of influence, like yourself, to help you by speaking a good word for you. I would like to place the book on royalty basis plan with anyone you would suggest. This is a secret from my husband and family. I intend it as a surprise in case I get it published. Feeling you will take an interest in this, and, if possible, write me a letter to some publisher, or, better still, if you could see them for me, and then let me hear, I appeal to you to grant me this favor. With deepest gratitude, I thank you for your attention. One knows, without inquiring, that the twin of that embarrassing letter is for ever and ever flying in this and that and the other direction across the continent in the mails daily, nightly, hourly, unceasingly, unrestingly. It goes to every well-known merchant and railway official and manufacturer and capitalist and mayor and congressman and governor and editor and publisher and author and broker and banker. In a word, to every person who is supposed to have influence. It always follows the one pattern. You do not know me, but you once knew a relative of mine," etc., etc. We should all like to help the applicants. We should all be glad to do it. We should all like to return the sort of answer that is desired. Well, there is not a thing we can do that would be a help, for not in any instance does that letter ever come from anyone who can be helped. The struggler whom you could help does his own helping. It would not occur to him to apply to you, a stranger. He has talent and knows it, and he goes into his fight eagerly, and with energy and determination, all alone, preferring to be alone. That pathetic letter which comes to you from the incapable, the unhelpable, how do you, who are familiar with it, answer it? What do you find to say? You do not want to inflict a wound. You hunt ways to avoid that. What do you find? How do you get out of your hard place with a contented conscience? Do you try to explain? The old reply of mine to such a letter shows that I tried that once. Was I satisfied with the result? Possibly, and possibly not. Probably not. Almost certainly not. I have long ago forgotten all about it. But anyway, I append my effort. The reply. I know Mr. H., and I will go to him, dear madam, if upon reflection you find you still desire it. There will be a conversation. I know the form it will take. It will be like this. Mr. H., how do her books strike you? Mr. Clemens, I am not acquainted with them. H., who has been her publisher? C., I don't know. H., she has one, I suppose? C., I think not. H., ah, you think this is her first book? C., yes, I suppose so. I think so. H., what is it about? What is the character of it? C., I believe I do not know. H., have you seen it? C., well, no, I haven't. H., how long have you known her? C., I don't know her. H., don't know her? C., no. H., how did you come to be interested in her book, then? C., well, she wrote and asked me to find a publisher for her, and mentioned you. H., why should she apply to you instead of to me? C., she wished me to use my influence. H., dear me, what has influence to do with such a matter? C., well, I think she thought you would be more likely to examine her book if you were influenced. H., why, what we are here for is to examine books, anybody's book that comes along. It's our business. Why should we turn away a book unexamined because it's a stranger's? It would be foolish. No publisher does it. On what ground did she request your influence, since you do not know her? She must have thought you knew her literature and could speak for it. Is that it? C., no, she knew I didn't. H., well, what then? She had a reason of some sort for believing you competent to recommend her literature, and also under obligation to do it. C., yes, I knew her uncle. H., knew her uncle? C., yes. H., upon my word. So you knew her uncle. Her uncle knows her literature. He endorses it to you. The chain is complete, nothing further needed. You are satisfied, and therefore— C., no, that isn't all. There are other ties. I knew the cabin her uncle lived in the mines. I knew his partners, too. Also, I came near knowing her husband before she married him, and I did know the abandoned shaft where a premature blast went off, and he went flying through the air and clear down to the trail, and hit an Indian in the back with almost fatal consequences. H. To him or to the Indian?
C. She didn't say which it was. H. With a sigh.
It certainly beats the band. You don't know her. You don't know her literature. You don't know who got hurt when the blast went off. You don't know a single thing for us to build an estimate of her book upon. So far as
C.
I knew her uncle. You are forgetting her uncle.
H.
Oh, what use is he? Did you know him long? How long was it?
C.
Well, I don't know that I really knew him, but I must have met him, anyway, about 16 years ago.
H.
What a basis to judge a book upon! At first you said you knew him, and now you don't know whether you did or not.
C.
Oh, yes, I knew him. Anyway, I think I thought I did. I'm perfectly certain of it.
H.
What makes you think you thought you knew him?
C.
Why, she says I did herself.
H.
She says so.
C.
Yes, she does, and I did know him, too, though I don't remember it now.
H.
Come, how can you know it when you don't remember it?
C.
I don't know. That is, I don't know the process, but I do know lots of things that I don't remember, and remember lots of things that I don't know. It's so with every educated person.
H. After a pause.
Is your time valuable?
C.
No. Well, not very.
H.
Mine is. So I came away then, because he was looking tired. Overwork, I reckon. I never do that. I have seen the evil effects of it. My mother was always afraid I would overwork myself, but I never did. Dear Madam, you would see how it would happen if I went there. He would ask me those questions, and I would try to answer them to suit him, and he would hunt me here and there and yonder, and get me embarrassed more and more all the time, and at last he would look tired on account of overwork, and there it would end and nothing done. I wish I could be useful to you, but you see, they do not care for uncles or any of those things. It doesn't move them. It doesn't have the least effect. They don't care for anything but the literature itself, and they as good as despise influence. But they do care for books, and are eager to get them and examine them, no matter whence they come, nor from whose pen. If you will send yours to a publisher, any publisher, he will certainly examine it. I can assure you of that.
Mark Twain. End of A Helpless Situation by Mark Twain, read by John Greenman. This is Section 9 of Mark Twain's Journal Writings, Volume 1, by Mark Twain. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. How I Escaped Being Killed in a Duel, by Mark Twain, read by John Greenman.
The only merit I claim for the following narrative is that it is a true story. It has a moral at the end of it, but I claim nothing on that, as it is merely thrown in to curry favor with the religious element. After I had reported a couple of years on the Virginia City, Nevada, Daily Enterprise, they promoted me to be editor-in-chief, and I lasted just a week by the watch. But I made an uncommonly lively newspaper while I did last, and when I retired I had a duel on my hands, and 3 horsewhippings promised me. The latter I made no attempt to collect. However, this history concerns only the former. It was the old flush times of the silver excitement, when the population was wonderfully wild and mixed. Everybody went armed to the teeth, and all slights and insults had to be atoned for with the best article of blood your system could furnish. In the course of my editing I made trouble with Mr. Lord, editor of the rival paper. He flew up about some little trifle or other that I said about him. I do not remember now what it was. I suppose I called him a thief, or a body snatcher, or an idiot, or something like that. I was obliged to make the paper readable, and I could not fail in my duty to a whole community of subscribers merely to save the exaggerated sensitiveness of an individual. Mr. Lord was offended, and replied vigorously in his paper. Vigorously means a great deal when it refers to a personal editorial in a frontier newspaper. Dueling was all the fashion among the upper classes in that country, and very few gentlemen would throw away an opportunity of fighting one. To kill a person in a duel caused a man to be even more looked up to than to kill two men in the ordinary way. Well, out there, if you abused a man and that man did not like it, you had to call him out and kill him. Otherwise you would be disgraced. So I challenged Mr. Lord, and I did hope he would not accept. But I knew perfectly well that he did not want to fight, and so I challenged him in the most violent and implacable manner. And then I sat down and suffered till the answer came. All our boys, the editors, were in our office, helping me in the dismal business, and telling about duels and discussing the code with a lot of aged ruffians who had had experience in such things, and altogether there was a loving interest taken in the matter which made me unspeakably uncomfortable. The answer came. Mr. Lord declined. Our boys were furious, and so was I, on the surface. I sent him another challenge, and another, and the more he did not want to fight, the bloodthirstier I became. But at last the man's tone changed. He appeared to be waking up. It was becoming apparent that he was going to fight me after all. I ought to have known how it would be. He was a man who never could be depended upon. Our boys were exultant. I was not, though I tried to be. It was now time to go out and practice. It was the custom there to fight duels with navy six-shooters at 15 paces, load and empty till the game for the funeral was secured. We went to a little ravine just outside of town and borrowed a barn door for a target. Borrowed it of a gentleman who was absent, and we stood this barn door up and stood a rail on end against the middle of it to represent Lord, and put a squash on top of the rail to represent his head. He was a very tall, lean creature, the poorest sort of material for a duel. Nothing but a line shot could fetch him, and even then he might split your bullet. Exaggeration aside, the rail was, of course, a little too thin to represent his body accurately, but the squash was all right. If there was any intellectual difference between the squash and his head, it was in favor of the squash. Well, I practiced and practiced at the barn door and could not hit it, and I practiced at the rail and could not hit that, and I tried hard for the squash and could not hit the squash. I would have been entirely disheartened, but that occasionally I crippled one of the boys, and that encouraged me to hope. At last we began to hear pistol shots near by in the next ravine. We knew what that meant. The other party were out practicing too. Then I was in the last degree distressed. For, of course, those people would hear our shots, and they would send spies over the ridge, and the spies would find my barn door without a wound or a scratch, and that would simply be the end of me, for of course that other man would immediately become as bloodthirsty as I was. Just at this moment a little bird, no larger than a sparrow, flew by, and lit on a sage-bush about 30 paces away, and my little second, Steve Gillis, who was a matchless marksman with a pistol, much better than I was, snatched out his revolver and shot the bird's head off. We all ran to pick up the game, and sure enough, just at this moment, some of the other duelists came reconnoitering over the little ridge. They ran to our group to see what the matter was, and when they saw the bird, Lord's second said, "That was a splendid shot. How far off was it?" Steve said with some indifference, "Oh, No great distance, about 30 paces. 30 paces? Heavens alive! Who did it? My man, Twain. The mischief he did! Can he do that often? Well, yes, he can do it about 4 times out of 5. I knew the little rascal was lying, but I never said anything. I never told him so. He was not of a disposition to invite confidences of that kind, so I let the matter rest. But it was a comfort to see those people look sick and see their under jaws drop when Steve made these statements. They went off and got Lord and took him home, and when we got home, half an hour later, there was a note saying that Mr. Lord peremptorily declined to fight. It was a narrow escape. We found out afterwards that Lord hit his mark 13 times in 18 shots. If he had put those 13 bullets through me, it would have narrowed my sphere of usefulness a good deal, would have well nigh closed it, in fact. True, they could have put pegs in the holes and used me for a hat-rack, but what is a hat-rack to a man who feels he has intellectual powers? I would scorn such a position. I have written this true incident of my personal history for one purpose, and one purpose only: to warn the youth of the day against the pernicious practice of dueling, and to plead with them to war against it. If the remarks and suggestions I am making can be of any service to Sunday school teachers and newspapers interested in the moral progress of society, they are at liberty to use them, and I shall even be grateful to have them widely disseminated, so that they may do as much good as possible. I was young and foolish when I challenged that gentleman, and I thought it was very fine and very grand to be a duelist and stand upon the field of honor. But I am older and more experienced now, and am inflexibly opposed to the dreadful custom. I am glad indeed to be enabled to lift up my voice against it. I think it is a bad, immoral thing. I think it is every man's duty to do everything he can to discourage dueling. I always do now. I discourage it upon every occasion. If a man were to challenge me now that I can fully appreciate the iniquity of that practice, I would go to that man and take him by the hand, lead him to a quiet retired room, and kill him.
End of How I Escaped Being Killed in a Duel, by Mark Twain. Read by John Greenman. This is Section 10 of Mark Twain's Journal Writings, Volume 1, by Mark Twain. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Newsletter and California Advertiser, June 13, 1868. Important to Whom It May Concern, by Mark Twain. Read by John Greenman. Messrs. Editors, I was expecting to sail for New York in the Pacific Mail Steamship Company's steamer of the 18th June, but unforeseen circumstances compel a delay of a few days. I cannot sail till the 30th of the month. It is therefore proper that I should give this notice to those friends who have entrusted articles to my care for delivery to their relatives in the Atlantic States, so that they can send by parties who sail on the 18th such of them as demand expedition. I will give a list of the things I am speaking of, and those which will admit of delay until the 30th can remain in my possession. 1 violin, 1 double-barreled gun, 1 package books, 1 ditto sheet music, Negro ballads, 1 set casters, vinegar cruet missing, 2 scratch wigs for repair, 1 woman, 7 boxes and 1 barrel ore specimens, 1 amalgamating pan for repair, 1 parrot, 1 pup, 1 cage canaries, 2 dead, another woman, 18 mining company prospectuses marked "Please circulate," 1 valise, appears to be nothing in it, 6 photographs consigned to different parties, 1 volume Tennyson,
1 white woman, 1 box salve, 2 accordions, 1 overcoat, 1 set chessmen, 1 cow, 1 sandalwood fan, 1 rosewood dressing case, 4 meerschaum pipes, 2 specimen pins, some grass widows, 1 Hoe steam press for repairs, 1 unabridged dictionary, 9 bandboxes, 1 lunatic for asylum, 1 idiot for Paris, 1 gridiron, 1 baby, 68 letters, 1 package gold coin, 1 ditto greenbacks, 23 trunks, another woman. Besides these articles, I have to carry along a valise for myself and a jug, and I may be discommoded unless some of the things go by the steamer of the 18th. The baby is not well, and appears to get worse all the time. I think maybe it has got the mumps, or the consumption, or something of that kind. Those are things I do not know anything about. It must be one of those, because I have doctored it for fits and measles and all those things, but still she grows worse. She had better go by the steamer of the 18th. I do not think she will keep for the 30th. To tell the plain truth, I am sorry I agreed to take this baby along. A baby is too troublesome, altogether too troublesome. I have had a baby at sea, and I know. Once I had twins on a ship, and I never suffered so much in my life. Please come and take this one, and ship it per steamer of the 18th. Most of the articles had better go at the same time, especially the cow and the idiot. If I were relieved of those, I could take some more women, and maybe another trunk or two. Mark Twain. End of Important To Whom It May Concern by Mark Twain, read by John Greenman. This is Section 11 of Mark Twain's Journal Writings, Volume 1, by Mark Twain. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Taken from Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, The Century, a popular quarterly magazine, January 1885, printed Jim's Investments and King Sollermun, by Mark Twain, read by John Greenman.
Jim knowed all kinds of signs. He said he knowed most everything. I said it looked to me like all the signs was about bad luck, and so I asked him if there warn't any good luck signs. He says, "Mighty few, and they ain't no use to body. What you want to know when good luck's come fur? Want to keep it off?" And he said, "If you's got hairy arms and hairy breasts, it's a sign that you're going to be rich. Well, dey's some use in a sign like dat, 'cause it's so fur ahead. You see, maybe you's got to be po' a long time first, and so you might get discouraged and kill yourself if didn't know by the sign that you're going to be rich by. Have you got hairy arms and a hairy breast, Jim?" "What's the use to ask dat question? Don't you see I has?"
"Well, are you rich?"
"No, but I been rich once, and gwine to be rich agin. Onct I had $14, but I tuck to speculatin' and got busted out."
"What'd you speculate in, Jim?"
"Well, first I tackled stock."
"What kind of stock?"
"Why, livestock. Cattle, you know. I put $10 in a cow, but I ain't going to risk no more money in stock. The cow up and died on my hands."
"So you lost the $10?
"No, I didn't lose it all. I only lost about 9 of it. I sold the hide and taller for $1.10.
"You had $5.10 left? Did you speculate any more?"
"Yes. You know dat one-legged nigger that belongs to old Mr. Bradish? Well, he sort up a bank, and say anybody that put in $1 would get $4 more at the end of the year. Well, all the niggers went in, but they didn't have much. I was the only one that had much. So I stuck out for more than $4, and I said if it didn't get it, I'd start a bank myself. Well, of course that nigger wanted to keep me out of the business, 'cause he say they weren't business enough for 2 banks, so he say I could put in my $5, and he pay me 35 at the end of the year. So I done it. Then I reckoned I'd invest the $35 right off and keep things a movin'. And there was a nigger named Bob that had ketched a wood flat, and his master didn't know it, and I bought it off him and told him to take the $35 when the end of the year come. But somebody stole the wood flat that night, and next day the one-legged nigger say the bank's busted, so they didn't none of us get no money. What did you do with the 10 cents, Jim? Well, I was going to spend it, but I had a dream, and the dream told me to give it to a nigger named Balaam's ass, they call him for short. He's one of them chuckleheads, you know, but he's lucky, they say, and I see I weren't lucky. The dream say to let Balaam invest the 10 cents and he'd make a raise for me. Well, Balaam, he tuck the money, and when he was in church he heard the preacher say that whoever give to the poor lend to the Lord, and bound to get his money back 100 times. So Balaam he tuck and give the 10 cents to the poor, and laid low to see what was going to come of it.
Well, what did come of it, Jim?
Nothing never come of it. I couldn't have managed to collect that money no way, and Balaam he couldn't. I ain't going to lend no more money down to see the security. I'm bound to getting your money back 100 times, the preacher says. If I could get the 10 cents back, I'd call it square. I'd be glad of the chance.
Well, it's all right anyway, Jim, long as you're going to be rich again some time or other.
Yes, and I's rich now, come to look at it. I owns myself, and I's worth $800. But livestock's too resky, Huck. I wished I had the $800 and somebody else had the nigger. I read considerable to Jim about kings, and dukes, and earls, and such, and how gaudy they dressed, and how much style they put on, and called each other your majesty, and your grace, and your lordship, and so on, instead of mister. Jim's eyes bugged out, and he was interested, and he says, I didn't know there was so many of 'em. I ain't heard about none of 'em, scarcely, but old King Sollermun, unless you counts them kings that's in a pack your cards. How much do a king get? Get? I says, why, they get $1,000 a month, if they want it. They can have just as much as they want. Everything belongs to them. Ain't that gay? And what they got to do, Huck? They don't do nothing. Why, how you talk. They just set around. No, is that so? Of course it is. They just set around, except maybe when there's war. Then they go to the war. But other times they just lazy around, or go hawking. Just hawking and Shh. Do you hear a noise? We skipped out and looked. But it weren't nothing but the flutter of a steamboat's wheel away down coming around the point. So we come back. Yes, says I. And other times, when things is dull, they fuss with the Parliament. And if everybody don't get just so, he whacks their heads off. But mostly they hang around the harem. Round the which? Harem. What's the harem? The place where he keeps his wives. Don't you know about the harem? Solomon had one. He had about 1,000,000 wives. Why, yes, that's so. I done forgot it. A harem's a boarding house, I reckon. Most likely they has rackety times in the nursery, and I reckon the wives quarrels considerable, and that creased the racket. Yet they say Solomon the wisest man that ever lived. I don't take no stock in that. Because why? Would a wise man want to live in the midst of such a blim-blamming all the time? No, 'deed he wouldn't. A wise man would take him and build a biler factory, and then he could shut down the biler factory when he want to rest. Well, but he was the wisest man, anyway, because the widow she told me so, her own self. I don't care what de widder say. He warn't no wise man, nuther. He had some of de dat fetches ways I ever see. Does you know 'bout dat child dat he was gwine to chop in two?
Yes, the widow told me all about it.
Wall, den, warn't dat de beatin'est notion in de world? You jes take a look at it a minute. Dar's de stump, dah, that's one er de women. Here's you, that's de other one. It's Sollermun. And dish yer dollar bill's de child. Before you claims it, what does I do? Does I shin around 'mongst de neighbors and find out which un you de bill do belong to, and then hand it over to the right one, all safe and sound, the way that anybody that had any gumption would? No, I take and whack the bill in two, and give half on it to you and the other half to the other woman. That's the way Solomon was going to do with the child. Now, I want to ask you, what's the use to half a bill? Can't buy nothing with it. And what's the use of half a child? I wouldn't give dern for 1,000,000 of 'em. But hang it, Jim, you've clean missed the point. Blame it, you've missed it 1,000 mile. Who, me? Go along. Don't talk to me 'bout your pants. I reckon I knows sense when I sees it, and dey ain't no sense in sich doin's as dat. De 'spute warn't 'bout half a child, de 'spute was 'bout a whole child, and a man dat think he can settle a 'spute 'bout a whole child with a half a child don't know enough to come in out in the rain. Don't talk to me 'bout Solomon, Huck, I knows him by de back.
But I tell you, you don't get the point.
Blame the pint. I reckon I knows what I knows, and mind you, de real pint is down furder. It's down deeper. It lays in de way Sollermun was raised. You take a man dat's got only one er two chillen. Is dat man gwine to be wasteful of chillen? No, he ain't. He can't 'ford it. He knows how to value 'em. But you take a man dat's got 'bout 5,000,000 chillen running round the house, and it's different. He as soon chop a child in two as a cat. Dey's plenty more. A child or two, more or less, warn't no consequence to Solomon, dad fetch him.
End of Jim's Investments in King Solomon, by Mark Twain. And end of Mark Twain's Journal Writings, Volume 1. Read by John Greenman.